Federal Communication Commission, FCC, is a regulatory entity, so we have a workforce in the field, but our main emphasis in the mobile space is really enabling both government users and the private sector to make much better use of mobility. We make that possible by enabling new uses of existing spectrum, as well as bringing new spectrum into wider usage, sometimes from older usages, like TV or legacy data services, as well as in some cases sharing spectrum between multiple users. So the main emphasis in the next few years is going to be keeping up with this rapidly rising demand for all kinds of wireless data applications where there is really no virgin spectrum available, where we really need to find other means of accommodating this explosion both of governmental use as well as private sector use in that. We also have activities that more address the ability to create unique applications for particularly communities. So we had, for example, last year an app challenge for communities, and earlier we also had a challenge for the technical community to build applications to measure broadband performance, including wireless and general network performance. So those are some of them kind of on the input side of what we can do as a regulator to make it easier for both government and private sector users of spectrum. Probably the biggest hurdle I would see is the legacy issues. It is just very difficult to deal with all the legacy applications, which are often embedded applications, often PC-specific applications, in an environment where you now have multiple platforms, typically web-focused, browser-focused, app-focused, as opposed to classical PC-installed applications. Also, many of the classical applications are designed for either typical desktop use because they essentially trust the user just because they're connected to the local network, or they at best work with clumsy VPNs. And so once you're in, you get free reign across all the applications. Neither is really particularly helpful. So the challenge really is to enable those in a world where we essentially have to assume that every device is on the internet, and it really doesn't matter whether this is mobile at that point, kind of nomadic like a desktop, a home PC that is not really mobile but is essentially functioning the same way, or newer mobile devices such as smartphones and tablets. The best practices that I see are to plan for device independence as opposed to have say an iPad strategy, to simply have a strategy to assume that devices come in all shapes and forms, plan for that early, and indeed plan for the security to make minimal assumptions as to what the device can and cannot do, but simply assume that you're operating in a hostile environment. And to operate, I believe, in environments which have still a wide variety of bandwidth availability, where you have some areas, say rural, where you might have only 2G type of data services, and in others where you have full-blown 4G LTE type of services with multi-megabits of bandwidth. So planning for diversity, network diversity, I think is one of the best practices that will help avoiding having to redo your strategy every few years. It's hard to say that across all government agencies because the missions are so different. You have, I think on one end of the spectrum, you have parts of the government that are inherently mobile. Law enforcement, military, say, where at least a large part of their needs have to be met by mobile applications. And on the other side, you probably have more desk-bound employees where mobility is really a supplement as opposed to the main one. And then you have both the inward-facing applications, namely the ones used by actual employees, and I think increasingly we're starting to see that apps are a mechanism for non-employees to reach services in ways that are much better than simply providing a website. So that, I think, is a relatively low-hanging fruit because it avoids many of the security issues that you would have with bringing traditional enterprise-style applications to mobile devices and into the mobile world. Just providing access access to data, for example, or services, not just in a deeply nested website, but in a specialized app, seems to me like a low-hanging fruit that can be explored for a citizen-facing side in the next 6 to 12 months.